Greetings, my name is John Gabriel, and this is the New Calculus channel. I would like to talk with you today about the psychological traits that are common to both the mainstream academic community and those who they call cranks. So let's begin. Now, mainstream math academics and cranks share what I think are the following common psychological traits. Each group is inspired and stimulated, they're stimulated by psychological distress, thereby adopting an extreme ideological outlook. So it's a type of approach whereby two opposing or diametrically opposite opinions come together, and there is no negotiation whatsoever. The one believes the other is wrong even before any negotiation takes place. And then secondly, their ideologies are characterized by very simple outlooks. In other words, a type of 0 and 1 situation. It's a black and white perception. So of what they perceive should be erudite or academic. And both groups are often oversimplistic and overconfident in their abilities and judgments. I think of especially mainstream academics, because there was a study done on mainstream academics published in the February 27, 2017 edition of the New Yorker, but it was research that had been done as early as 1975, which was focused on academics, not only undergraduates, but also postgraduate academics, and further than that. And this study is very, very interesting because it reveals the mindset of such academics. Okay, and their chief, let's call it a thorn in the flesh, which is confirmation bias. So they often are overconfident in their abilities and judgments. Even when they don't understand, they assume that the majority from their group must be holding the correct views and must be the group that has the right approach. And then finally, they exercise zero tolerance to anyone with different views. So if you come from the opposite extreme, whether you're a crank or a mainstream academic, and by the way, they've gone as far as labeling anyone who doesn't have their views a crank. But that's not what the meaning of crank is. The meaning of crank is one who cannot be convinced in the face of overwhelming evidence. They don't even think about evidence. They just automatically believe or have faith that their views are the correct ones and that any other views are wrong. Okay, so typically that's the kind of approach that the Pharisees and Sadducees had when they were debating Christ. So I'm not a Christian, by the way, but I'm just telling you that the Pharisees and the Sadducees are forerunners of mainstream mathematics academics. They'll simply close their eyes and shut their ears, simply because you do not belong to their group. And they'll go a step further than that by attributing character traits that are not actually attributable to those groups. For example, if you're not part of their group, you're automatically not a good person. So it extends beyond your views. It extends to your character. They will assassinate your character, as you have seen many people done in my case. So, for example, you'll see here, there are many websites, but take a look at this moron, Dennis Miller. set up an entire website about me. And he's wrong, but he can't even see that he's wrong. So, if you read this particular page here, you'll see how he goes on about, things that he doesn't understand, that he's never understood, but because it's not part of his mainstream diet, he believes that it's his duty to tear down anything that I have to say about it. Of course, he's totally wrong, and you can't reason with a person like this because he's a fanatic. The same thing goes for these Greek academics. So, for example, I posted a comment many years ago on, well, not many years ago, but maybe a couple of years ago on mathematica.gr. And this is the kind of response I got. In fact, I didn't even ask for their opinion. I was asking initially for somebody who'd be interested in translating my free ebook. But the kind of response I got was toxic. I mean, you'll see, especially the chief administrator, Michalis Lambru, who says that John Gabriel is a mathematical crack, a well-known mathematical crack. I mean, he didn't even bother to consider what I was saying. Incidentally, what I was telling them here, I was revealing a truth to them. And it turns out that this is a historic geometric theorem, which I realized, which shows that their mainstream formulation of calculus is bogus. And of course, there are many other sites. I'm just using those as an example. But they're mentally incapacitated so that they cannot, because of their confirmation bias and their narrow-minded stance, be able to even consider a different point of view or anything anyone else has to say. I believe it was one of the Greek philosophers who said that it takes a very strong individual to listen to a fool even without having to accept what that fool has to say, or something along those lines. But it turns out that these people are so deceived, and I must say, I have had death threats from these people, and they're documented. For example, on sci.math, I'm completely a persona non grata. I still post there every day as a means of publishing my ideas, because that's the only site that is unmoderated, and I'm not allowed on any other site simply because they have soiled public opinion about me. In fact, they've been responsible for 2 job losses that I had some years ago in my career. And these people see me as desperately evil, when the truth is that they are the ones who are exercising malice. And they are the ones who are rejected me, because when I first approached the mainstream community many, many years ago, I was scorned and laughed at. Now they're not laughing so much because a lot of them know that I'm right, but they're cowards. They'll never step forward. I mean, most math professors, in my opinion, and I know this is perhaps an overgeneralization, I consider them to be scum. I can't help that. It's just the way I found these people. They have no backbone. They have no honesty. They have no mental fortitude. They are simply there to perpetuate their careers, to feather their pockets, to have job security, excuse me, and basically not to give a hoot about what is the correct approach or the truth. Truth is no longer relevant in mainstream mathematics. And I would go as far as saying that this extends to most other academic groups as well. Now, if you look at these extremists, they have the same character traits as Trump's supporters. I mean, Trump supporters, for example, honestly believe that Biden lost the election. They believe there is evidence when there has not been a shred of evidence that Biden lost the election, because Biden won the election overwhelmingly. So coming back to, what is the difference between these people? Well, there's very little difference between the way that they reason and think. So they'll call each other names, and they'll classify one as being a certain type of person if they're not part of their group, which is really a shame, because even if one is an extremist, there is no way that extremist is ever going to change. And so each person should be considered on the merit of what they have to say, not because they have a different view or a different opinion. Then there's also the cultural discrimination. I know, excuse me, I know that from past experience, when you're not part of the same culture. For example, I'm not an Anglo-Saxon, but I've lived in Anglo-Saxon countries most of my life. And I have felt the prejudice and discrimination. Sometimes openly, but most of the times in a very veiled way. For example, it's the way they respond to you. It's the way they see you. It's the fear they exhibit towards you being different, towards you looking different. And so people have these biases to anything that is different to how they look or how they think. But in the end, they're all the same extremists, fundamentalist ideologists, who are actually not very different from each other, and yet they hate each other. So it's based on this false notion that each of them have the right belief. It's like different religions. How can they all be right if they have different beliefs? Well, religion is garbage and the Bible is garbage, but that's besides the point. The point is, these people do not like to even entertain anything that they have grown up to believe is different. So what typically these idiotic mainstream math academics forget is that I actually studied their approach and their knowledge. So it's not like I'm not aware of it. I understand it. It's not that I don't understand it, it's that I don't accept it as being correct. And for that, I'm labeled a crank. And for that, my life has been destroyed. It's such a shame, isn't it? Because there is so much more I have to offer, but I'm not going to, because there's no incentive. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this little chat, and that you'll think about the way you treat anyone else who has a different opinion to you. That at the very least, you should have the courtesy to listen to what the person has to say. Not to listen in order to know how you should respond in the form of an argument, but to understand what the other individual is trying to tell you. I'm John Gabriel, and this is a New Calculus channel. Till next time, goodbye, folks.